Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. This episode is going to be a little bit different than the usual episodes because in this episode, I have a question that I'm trying to solve. And that is, what the hell does walk the dinosaur mean? I'm your host, Devin Decker, and joining me, my host companion, Sejan Sarowick. Sejan?
Yes, thank you, Devin, with a very timely question. The thing that's plaguing us all right now in this country.
It is plaguing me right now in this country, and self-care is important because for some reason, Spotify was like, hey, Devin, you should listen to Walk the Dinosaur. And I'm like, I like that song. Doesn't Mario steal the necklace from Big Bertha to that song? Isn't the Super Mario Brothers movie like weirdly meta by having them dance to Walk the Dinosaur? Which means that Dino Hatton, still the greatest bit of writing in the history of humanity, human society. Words escape me whenever I
Please,
think
Devin,
about
Hugh
whenever I think about Dino Hatton, it's just like, it's such a first draft pass, but it's also fucking brilliant.
You know, my problem with Dino Hatton is it always takes me too long to figure out the joke, even though I remember it every time, eventually. Like, every time I figure out, oh, right, man, Dino, got it. It's still, the next time I hear it, will take me 10 minutes to, like, try and calculate what the joke is supposed to be.
I mean, my question about the Super Mario Brothers movie is, does Mojo Nixon exist in our universe? Or is he only Toad in the dinosaur universe?
So you know who does the I guess you would call it a cover, the remix of that for the Mario Brothers movie, right?
No,
it's not was not was.
It's not was not was not. I know that, but I don't know who does it.
Come on, it's the King of Funk. It's George Clinton.
Oh God, the Parliament
Yeah,
Funk,
right.
the P Funk.
Yeah, I know. It's considered a low point in his career.
Thank God he was able to bounce back with PCU a couple of years later. Actually, he's really good in PCU.
He's very good at PCU. Well, because he's playing himself. Well, I guess he is in Good Burger too. It's just he's in a mental institution for some reason. But you know who ends up actually doing a really good cover of it for fucking Ice Age of all things?
I don't know.
Latifah does it for Dawn of the Dinosaurs because she's the big get for that one. She plays the female mammoth, if I'm not mistaken.
She does. She plays the female mammoth, but
and so she does a cover of Walk the Dinosaur for that movie.
Confession time. While I have seen Ice Age and the fourth Ice Age and the fifth Ice Age, I've never seen the Meltdown or Dawn of the Dinosaurs. And it's also kind of embarrassing that I do not know the names of the other two that I've seen. Collision Course. That's the fifth one.
Yeah.
I don't know the fourth one. But yeah.
It's okay. It's a universe that does not need our audience.
Good. Very good.
But yeah, Queen Latifah ends up doing a cover of that for that. I forget what version they use in the Flintstones, because it showed up in the Flintstones too. Yeah. I bet it's just was not was though, because that fucking music video for Walk the Dinosaur is, I swear to God, just an early concept for either the Dinosaurs TV show or the Flintstones movie.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But the issue is, when you're listening to it in movies, right, and you're not actually actively seeking out the song, and if you're someone out there who has actively sought the was not, that's what it is.
Was
right?
not was.
Was
yeah,
that,
there it is.
If you're a person who is actively seeking the was not was version of Walk the Dinosaur, and not someone who is aware of it simply because of these covers that occurred in popular prehistoric fiction films from the 90s and late 2000s, I want to hear from you at the Say Report on Twitter, because I don't believe even the people who put this song in those movies listen to the full song.
I
think they heard the chorus
to the lyrics
and were like, "Hey, everybody walk the dinosaur." That's like walk like an Egyptian, but
exactly. Yeah, no. The lyrics to that song are an enigma that we will never crack, I feel.
Yeah. But we'll get back to that because that's the grand question of this episode of the Say Report. So for now, we have some other things that we need to talk about. Sejan, I'm going to hand it to you. What have you been up to since the last episode of the Say Report?
Well, so we had a month before, not including last week's episode, but we had a month of movie watching that we just went through in May, and it was a long one. It was on unlike previous Brendan Fraser history months. This one was a bit of a slog because if as no surprise to anybody that listened to those episodes, was not a huge fan of most of the movies that we ended up watching this time around, and so I needed to take a break from the screen for just a little bit, just a tiny break. And so I've been filling my last couple of weeks with a lot of things like reading and comics and things like that. So I've been in that boat.
Excellent. Anything to share? I don't know how to go from there. I thought you'd continue.
No, so one of the big things is that where should I start? Okay, so did I talk to you about the goat glands?
The goat glands?
Clearly I did not. All right. So back in my fine tenure at Netflix, we had a library at the office that we could like pull books out of to read between calls and stuff like that. And it was a pretty decent library. It had a mix of everything from like crossword puzzle books to historical fiction to Stephen King, all sorts of crazy shit, right? Well, in my final days there, people started to unsurprisingly kind of claim things, bit by bit by bit. I took a few things myself. And finally, when it came down to the last few days, there was not much left in the old library. And all that was really left was like old like People magazines and like Us Weekly and things like that. And this one book called Charlatan. And I picked it up, and on the front page, and on the front of the book, it sounded amazing. It's this whole thing about the most dedicated snake oil salesman in the United States and the man who like pursued him and basically shut him down. And I was like, oh, that sounds great. And then I read the back of the book, and I was sold instantly. This dude spent his entire career, like decades, traveling around this country and eventually down into Mexico in order to run away from the law, like selling people on the idea that he could replace their testicles with goat testicles and it would make them live forever. Like that was his entire bit. Was like, hey, I'm gonna like put these and then at some point it was revealed that he wasn't even removing other people's testicles. He was just kind of going in and just sneaking a third one in there. And that was his fountain of youth. That was his secret. And he made an empire off of this. And like I could do a whole podcast on that guy alone, because this dude ended up like being like the reason that country radio exists, the reason that we have the FCC laws that we have in this country and the airwave laws that we have in this country. It was crazy what this dude ended up leading. And so I spent an entire like 3 months like reading that book. Even after I left Netflix, I stole that book. You better believe I did. And I've just been like, I was like taking it in like every few pages, every couple of nights, right? And it was fascinating. But I got to the end of it and I realized like, okay, I have spent like 2 months, 3 months reading this historical book with a lot of like factual stuff in it. And I've been doing a lot of research on the side because the second I heard about somebody, I just had to find out, more about them. And I just like, I need something stupid. I can't, I've been bouncing these goat balls around in my head for like 3 months. I need to get away from science for like a second, especially this like woo science. Because mind you, I'm reading this whole thing about this guy who is selling people on this false drug and basically people loving it, and the dude chasing him, and how people kind of don't like the government dude that's like after him because like this doctor comes into town and he's like, hey, I'm going to cure all your problems. Just give me a little bit of money here and everything will be all right. And then the scientist dude with like this coming in for representing like a governmental body is just like, no, he's lying to you. Your problems are yours forever. They're not to be solved. We can't figure these things out right now. Sorry. And it's just like, who these people are going to believe, right? And I'm reading this at the exact same time that like fucking coronavirus is taking off in this country, all over the world, really. So like I'm reading this when we're learning about like putting bleach in your fucking eyeball or whatever it was. I'm reading about this when people are out there like buying up like what is it, reactivated charcoal to like swallow and shit like that, whatever other nonsense was coming out at the time.
Or...
Yeah, all that nonsense, right? So like at the same time I'm reading this, the world is now like falling back into it, and it was getting real scary. So I had to back away from like educated reading for just a little bit. And so I found myself for the last month diving into the Jack Reacher novels. A hard swing in the other direction.
I'd like to get back to the goat testicles and why it's completely believable to me, an educated man in 2020, that inserting a goat testicle into your scrotum would promise you immortality. Let's start with the fact that the goat, Balthus, is very much a representation of the devil. And what is the devil but an eternal being? And goats, clearly his minions upon this planet. We've all seen the Vivitch. Is that how you say it? Or is it just the witch?
The Vivitch.
The Vivitch.
A New England ghost story, the Vivitch. Yeah. No,
we all know about Black Tom. Black Tom got a poster.
And he ended up in another couple of movies, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he did have another couple of films under his belt because everybody loves an evil goat. And you know, what does GOAT stand for, as we've learned with the 6 Super Bowl victories of Thomas Brady? Greatest of all time. Not greatest of some time. You're not a ghost, you're the GOAT. So it believes that goat testicles would keep you immortal. This guy, I think he was clued into something. He just didn't have the science to prove it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was kind of the selling point to begin with, is like these poor farmers that were, you know, getting on in years and also, like, you know, they weren't performing, as it were, in the bedroom. So these guys would come in and after a while he realized that, like, he could just point to like a goat and be like, well, you know, goats are like fuck until they die, right? Like, and he's like, look at the way that, like, the goat behaves up until its last days. Like, the goat is young eternally, right? And these farmers were like, I can't argue with that. Goats are pretty shitty up until the day that they die.
Have you heard the news of the day, gentlemen?
Yeah,
goats.
Like, these guys were just like, yeah, these goats. Like, let's do it. Let's make me part goat, I guess, right? Yeah, and it just led to this whole fucking like line of stuff. But like, it was just like, some of the shit in the book was just hilarious because it came down to it and they put him on the stand probably like the 3rd time and they finally got through him and he just like, it had to admit that he just didn't know anything, right? And the craziest part was when he admitted that this medicine that he had been selling for, I think at the time, like $400 a bottle, and this is like the like 1930s, 1940s, and he was selling this shit for so much, and they did like they did like a spectrograph or whatever they did at the time on it and figured out that it was like 0.001% like blue dye and the rest was just water.
Checks
That's
out.
it.
That blue dye,
like,
the grandest of the dyes. We all know this.
Yeah, and he's like, so he would do this stuff to people, he would do these surgeries to people, and then sell them for the rest of their lives on this medicine that they then needed to take to keep it all in check.
I don't doubt that Viagra is only blue because of this guy, as like a fun Easter egg.
I mean, not even an Easter egg, right? Like, at this point, it's because they know that they can sell that shit to people. Oh, it's a weird color. It's an unnatural color for this thing to be. Like, let me devour it, I guess. Yeah, it was, again, it was fascinating to read, but then the longer we got into like the coronavirus stuff, the creepier and weirder it started to get, you know?
I gotta
At
tell
some point,
you,
he ended up like running for governor of Kansas and almost wins it, and it was upsetting how familiar that story was.
he ran on a goat testicle platform, which is just the craziest words I got to say. But I need to be completely honest with you, as I know nothing. I have not read this book. I know nothing more than the last 7 minutes that Sejin has educated me on about this person. But I am now convinced that out there in the world, there's like a community of these people who got the goat testicle transplant and they're still alive. And they're just like, they keep to themselves, and it worked for them. Like, there was some like genetic anomaly. Honestly, what I'm pitching is an episode of the X-Files, but really I'm pitching an episode of Ghosted or Goated, where it's you and me instead of Adam Scott and Craig Robinson. Is that his name?
Yeah, it was. Yep.
And we find this town and we're like, it's the freaking goat people. And I'm like all convinced, and you gotta unfortunately play the Dana Scully role and be like, don't be ridiculous, even though you have more knowledge of it. But like, I don't know, I'm in the bathroom and I accidentally look down and see the dude with the triple tests, and I'm just like,
Yeah. John Brinkley was the guy's name, by the way, if anybody needs to like look into this further. Like, I highly recommend. The book is, again, it's called Charlatan. Let me read you the full name of it. Hold on. It's called Charlatan, America's Most Dangerous Huckster, The Man Who Pursued Him in the Age of Flim Flam. It's a hell of a title for a book.
It sounds like a
but
better version of Highwaymen, that
Yeah.
movie that had a great cast but was boring as sin. And as I was so bored, it was a sin. Sin is not
man.
boring. I don't know. That has to have been like a Catholic Church propaganda march. Boring is sin. They're like, sin's boring. Once you've had sex, you'll become bored of it. How can you procreate afterwards?
Yeah. Well, goat testicles, but
Yeah, obviously. It's all interconnected. I would oh God, I'm
surprised I didn't talk about this sooner, because I kid you not, like I was reading this for a long time. I was diving into this book and just like tearing it apart, and like I said, it's fascinating how much of it how much of it is clearly insane and how much of it is clearly still happening was just upsetting the entire time.
So, I guess the question I have is, first of all, no, before I get to the fun little wrap up where I feel like I'm a professional for 2 seconds, I'm so fucking mad that you brought this into my life, because now I want to find the goat town and have an adventure there.
Oh, man.
Jeez. And the real thing is, could having 3 testicles, one of goat origin, be what walking the dinosaur is? Continue listening to the Say Report to find out.
Closer than you realize. So there's like I said, after reading a bunch of that, and it is an academic book. The guy that writes it, his name is Pope Brock, and I got into it because I love Mary Roach, and I was looking for books to read after reading Mary Roach books, and a bunch of websites recommended this book to me, which is the other reason why I was so fascinated that I found it in my library at work, is I was just like, oh, I've actually been like looking for this book. So it was kind of like,
Hashtag Goat Town exists, man. Hashtag Goat Town exists.
Yeah,
and they want you to find it.
Yeah.
I was like, this National Treasure 3 Goat Town. That's what this is.
You know, I was going to say it's a godsend, but the more that you talked about how the devil is definitely represented by a goat, I'm starting to think other forces were at work there.
I mean, it's definitely... No, I mean, the people who are at work are the goat people. I don't know why they need you. I don't... because obviously, I mean, I've only seen 2 episodes of I've seen 3 episodes of the X-Files. I always say 2 because there were only 2 that I had ever seen. One was the one where the guy got struck by lightning that aired before the episode of Sliders that introduced the Cro-Mags. And that's because I was so excited for the Cro-Mags that I'm like, I'm not watching X-Files before it. That's weird, right? I'm weird. I love Sliders. And the other one is the Brady Bunch episode. Those are the 2 episodes I watched during the X-Files original run.
I think in retrospect, I think like one of the best episodes of that show is the Stephen King episode, and I think he actually ended up doing a couple, but the one specifically about the doll, and like at the time, a lot of people were like, "This is super hokey," but in retrospect, that whole show is super hokey now. So like that episode was just kind of ahead of the curve.
Right, and of course the third one. Now that I have to say, I've seen Home a bunch of times because it's it's a masterclass in like television. Like if I were ever going to teach on it. But what I'm saying is, knowing nothing about the X-Files, even though you're the reason that they want us there, even though I'm the one who finds out about them and all this, you as the skeptic who has all the knowledge are the goal. You're what they want.
Yeah.
And I still don't know why. And I want hashtag Goat Town is real. I'm so scared, Sechin. That's not what we need right now. We don't need Goat Town.
We have spent so much more time on the goat testicles than I thought we were going to.
Well,
I thought we were going to be talking a lot more about like Child Lee and Jack Reacher.
I got a Lee Childs.
Child's Lee.
Child Lee is, I don't know, a Bruce Lee reference joke. Haha, Devin Decker. No. Well, you know what? It's because it captures the imagination. The goat testicles thing. At
I know.
least my imagination.
No, not clearly not just yours. That's what the whole book is about, right? Is like this like they I kid you not. He went across this country and he would go into a place, he'd basically like indoctrinate everybody into his way of thinking, open up a business, run a business and all this shit. And then this other guy would come in and people would actually be legitimately pissed off at this like doctor coming in and being like, "You're full of shit. The goat testicles clearly work." Even though like people who were around them were like dying and he was like he was like straight up like murdering some people and like in his hospitals, and everybody was just like, "This is great, give him more money." It's like, what are you doing?
Well, if you want to live forever, you gotta crack a few goat testicles. I really want to move away from this, but it has captured my imagination. I understand why this guy amassed a fortune and did this his whole life. Because I hear about it now, again, as an educated person in 2020, and I'm like, fucking sign me up for Goat Town. I don't want the procedure, but I want it to be out there. I want these people who are still alive from back then, this fountain of youth to be true. They've been, you know, replicating, reproducing is the word. They didn't also gain, like, mitosis ability. I don't know what the one is that is. Not mitosis. Whatever.
Osmosis? No. What are you talking
osmosis
about?
is the one you draw. It's when cells split. I don't know.
Divorce? What are we talking about?
No, it's good that he's learned how to reproduce. It's asexual reproduction in cells. Has a word. It might be mitosis, and I'm so distracted by the goat testicles of it all.
Yeah, you know, all this shit about Scorsese and Leo like going over budget with Paramount and like Apple having to step in, and I kept hoping that the book that they were doing was this book. Killers of the Flower Moon sounds super good too. I've actually like I straight up went and like ordered that book from Amazon once I realized what it was, but I cannot tell you how much I was just like, this would be so fascinating.
I don't know. I just want to do the half-hour to an hour television program where we stumble upon the town of the descendants of the goat testicle people. And like this, like it's like a cult at this point. And at the age of 13,
that's what we would call it. You know that.
Yes. And at the age of 13, that's when the male children have their goat testicle introduced. And they need women. And they think you can get them women. I don't know.
God.
Something. It's a first draft. Dino Hatton. Jack Reacher. I can't talk about Jack Reacher. Jack Reacher, we don't get along, Jack Reacher and I. I love the movies. I love that Kobe Smulders is in Never Look Back or Never Go Back or Never Blank Back. I don't
Jack
know.
Reacher Never Returns or something. I don't know either.
Jack Reacher Tomorrow Never Dies. That movie's really, really. I like both of them, but you know, I was on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and the question I got wrong is what branch of the military did Jack Reacher belong to?
Yeah, to be fair, it's not even clear in the books half the time, so I don't. That's a bullshit.
They
question.
certainly don't ask. They don't mention it in the movie. Because I watched that movie with a fine-tooth comb. It's difficult to watch a movie with a comb. And they never mentioned that he's a former Army Ranger in the first movie.
Yeah,
so,
it's weird because, yes, he's a former Army Ranger, but the idea is that he, in particular, got some very special training in other ways. So, like, he runs up against other military dudes, even in... I don't know, but in the movie, I think he does, right? Because in the first one, that's the whole thing about the army guys, and one of them gets framed for the mass killing, right?
Yeah,
isn't that the first one?
The first one is sort of, what if the born identity, Treadstone? What if Treadstone was real, and some guy who got like one extra week of training as an Army Ranger had to tear them down?
Yeah,
because it's very strange. Like it's so Born Identity and Treadstone in that movie that I'm like, this is a separate story. This is based on a different book.
Yeah, it's weird because like he does that thing that like Tom Clancy does. He does what Tom Clancy does with politics, but whereas like Tom Clancy takes it in a political thriller like wave, so like he'll do the rip from the headlines thing with like, oh, nuclear war with Russia, let's do a whole thing about that, right? Whereas like Lee Childs will take an idea and then he'll go like 80s 90s action movie with it, right? So it becomes this very surface level excuse for Jack Reacher to just kill a bunch of dudes. And that was exactly what I was looking for. You have to understand. I say that and that's not criticism. I say that because that is what I wanted when I decided to dive back into these books, because I had read a couple before, but I picked up specifically. I could not tell you where this falls in the canon. This could possibly be the newest one. This could possibly be one that's 20 years old at this point. But I grabbed the one Blue Moon, and it halfway through becomes this whole thing about I guess it has to be somewhat new because the entire thing becomes about Russian hoax and about how they're running their like basically like Facebook and social media shit from like within the country, right? And they like, but it's so like secondary to the whole story of him just going around and killing a bunch of dudes. Like it's just like, oh, by the way, the Russians are kind of the backbone of this whole story, but surprise.
He's also real litigious, right? I feel like every time I have conversations with people who read Jack Reacher books, they focus on the fact that he's kind of just like a lawyer or working for lawyers. Like that's his job.
He often finds himself involved with those types of people. They are, and saying that, there is a specific group of people in this book that are 3 lawyers that are helping like the family out that he's also helping.
Lazar, Condadactyl, and Cohen. I'm keep doing it. I'm gonna keep. I have them at the ready. I haven't watched the movie in at least 4 years, but continue. I apologize.
Grim and Goose, wasn't that ours once? So there is definitely that element to it. He does always kind of end up finding himself with those people, and I think what it is it's Lee Child's kind of justification for him doing the thing that he's doing. Like, not only does he show you that these people are bad people in other ways, like in this one you find out that they're running like porn rings and things like that, and this is
definitely recent. Like that's Jeffrey Epstein right there.
Okay, yeah. But the idea that the idea being that he goes to these lawyers and they give him like legal reasons why the law can't do what needs to be done. So Jack Reacher has to step in. Like that's the whole thing. Is like normally like in Batman you have Gordon that steps in and is just like, here's the line that the cop can't cross. I need you to do it for us, right? And it always gives Batman the excuse to go that extra mile, right? It is that for Jack Reacher. He always needs to have a lawyer in his story come to him and be like, I've done everything that I can do on the side of the law and I cannot go any further. And he's just like, all right, leave it to me. And then he shows up like 30 pages later with like money in hand and he's like, I did it. I solved a problem. Like it's and so you're not wrong. There is definitely always like this weird like legal aspect to his stories, but it's only serving justification for why it's okay that Jack Reacher is doing the thing that he's doing. But man, Lee Childs can write an action scene. It's crazy. It's crazy how much you can picture in the books, like what you would see on the movie screen. So like when you see those movies, they're pretty good representations of the book. All of the Tom Cruise-ness aside, like it is a really good representation of what you see on the page, because they don't have to add shit. Like all of the crazy ass action stuff where he can kill 10 guys in a room, like that is in the books. Like and they talk about him doing like the Sherlock Holmes style, like guessing how much weight he has to put this way, and then he has to suddenly like shift to the left that way. He'll take a hit, but he knows if he takes it in the right spot, he'll be able to recover that way. Like it's fascinating.
I think I have a Jack Reacher book, and you've convinced me to find it and read it. That's what has just happened here. Yeah. So thank you, and I guess thanks to you, Lee Childs.
I also like the other side of it is that I really love the lone samurai like style to the character of Jack Reacher. Like he is this like traveling hero that doesn't lay down roots. And so he might find, like James Bond style, he might find a love interest in the story, but they're probably not going to stick around. Like that's not the point of them. And so there's this idea that like much like the ways in which the reason why we enjoy sitcoms is because we know by the end of it everything will be okay, right? It's that same idea where like I don't need I don't need a depressing story about my action hero who like realizes this is his last time out and he's gonna get killed. Like I don't always need a Logan. Like sometimes I just need fucking Jack Reacher to just go in and break a couple of noses and for him to get out of town and for nobody to ask any questions.
Yeah, they're airport novels, right? Like
Yeah,
that's the
exactly.
actual
Yeah,
term
yeah.
for it.
Right. It's just what it is like I want to make sure that we clarify that I don't mean that as like a criticism. I call them beach reads, but it's the same idea, right? Like it's not a criticism at all. There is a necessary place in pop culture for this style of like entertainment, and like Lee Childs is a master of it. Much of the same way that I feel about like Stephen King for horror, and there's a million others that we can point out of like
John Grisham for
right,
legal
yeah,
thrillers.
for the legal thriller, right, yeah, and even Tom Clancy to a point. Like some of his political stuff is really well researched and really good, and honestly super influential on what we like now do. Like you talk about the Bourne Identity, there'd be no Bourne stories without Tom Clancy 20-30 years ago, right? Like and so
I don't know. I need to look at when Robert Ludlum wrote the Bourne Identity because I feel like they were similar.
Maybe the Bourne Identity though very much is in a post like 90s world of like these guys that are raised together to be these machines, whereas like Tom Clancy is very much still writing in that whole like we spy novel, like you know what I mean, like
yes.
Almost like Tinker Tailor, like from back in like the 60s, right? Like there's a little bit more of a classic feel to a Tom Clancy than there is to a Robert Ludlum, but I may be wrong. Maybe they were writing at the same time.
It's okay. I know that I found Bourne Identity cleaning out a storeroom at the high school, and it became like sort of my life for a little bit.
The Bourne stuff is pretty rad when you get into it. What I like about the Bourne stuff is the world in which Ludlum creates for that universe is pretty rad.
Yeah, that's why I read other books by Robert Ludlum, not necessarily Bourne books, but freshman year of college, they were having a book sale. And first of all, it was being run, right? This is just further proof that we live in a television show and hashtag GoTown is real. It was being run by my former high school principal's wife. She was running this weird book sale that was going on in the English building. Was that Independence Hall? Was that what that was called?
Maybe.
I think it was called that. By the time you got there, they had changed the name. It's all glass. It's where we took that Spanish film class that ended up focusing on Cuban cinema and was taught in all Spanish for the first two classes.
Yeah.
That was
and we were like, we're not here for the Spanish part.
We're here for the movie part.
Yeah, man.
But yeah, it was in that building, and there was just one box full of Robert Ludlum books, and I'm like, how much for this box? And she's like, $1. I don't really care. And I'm like, cool. I gave her $1. I walked out of there with 25 Robert Ludlum novels.
I guess like what it is like Robert Ludlum was very much forward thinking in a lot of the stuff he was writing, whereas like Clancy was always much more backwards, like looking at history to inform the ways that he was writing his stuff. And like that's what it feels like with Jack Reacher, is that it's very much looking back at, like I said, like the 80s and 90s, and looking at the ways in which like we kind of very much glorified the American military figure, and the ways in which he can, if you didn't name the Marine, if you told me it was a Jack Reacher movie, I would believe it, right? Like we still do that. And so with him writing these books still and looking back and doing that stuff, it fills a very nice niche for me.
Excellent. So there's other stuff I wanted to talk about, but in your rambling about Jack Reacher, you reminded me that something happened last week. Something that I have been waiting for easily 14 years. And I didn't know how to react at the time. And what is podcasting if not therapy? So I'd like to share this moment with you and you, the listener. Are you familiar with American Dad?
What? What is this? What is this show you're speaking of?
Oh, well, it turns out that Seth MacFarlane, best known for Family Guy on the small screen and Ted on the large screen, he has another cartoon. And cartoon...
That seems like he's really pushing his luck if that's the case.
Right. Well, he had a spin-off of Family Guy called The Cleveland Show, in the interest of full disclosure. But right in the halcyon days before Family Guy came out on DVD. In fact, the original reason why they agreed to release Family Guy on DVD was he had done a pilot for a series called American Dad.
Okay.
And I mean, American Dad is the first season is basically Family Guy if Peter Griffin was a CIA agent and hyper conservative.
And if, all right, dropping the bit for just a second, it is like I am going to do this here because this is a safe space for me to do this. I'm going to take umbrage with the criticism that it is just Family Guy, but it's about politics instead. I think it is better than that. I think it is so much better than that.
There's a very specific reason that I chose the words "the first season."
Well, I think it's even shorter than that. I think it's just the first episode.
It's the first five. It's the first 4 episodes.
Yeah,
as a person who has done, once you get to
it's...
season 1, episode 5, Roger Codger, when Roger dresses up as an old woman and sneaks out of the house, that establishes Roger putting on costumes and being a million different characters and having 1,000 different lives. And that's really when the show shifts.
And it really drops a lot of the Family Guy tropes of like the cutaway and the uncomfortable bit. Like that sort of stuff is just not American Dad's bag.
Right.
And pretty quickly it drops a lot of that stuff.
If I actually had to point at one episode in particular where that started, it would be season 1, episode 7, Deacon Stan Jesus Man. Wow, yes. Good for me. Where he runs to be the deacon and
against that's the one with one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite jokes of all time is when Steve is talking about algebra in order to touch boobs.
Yep. Which that just came up in my Facebook memories, and I forgot to put it in quotation marks. So I'm like, wow, this makes me look like a real creep. When I don't, the really weird alien
pregnancy storyline and like a whole bunch of stuff in it. That is
actually,
such a good episode.
You know what? So it is definitely after Roger Codger because not Homeland Insecurity. It is Homeland Insecurity. The one where Steve joins the Boy Scout analog and burns down the gazebo. That's episode 6. So it is. It's from episode 5 forward that they're like, well, Family Guy got brought back. So we can abandon all of the things we were doing to make this Family Guy again and make this our own show.
Yeah.
And I love American Dad. It has been airing for 15 years. I don't think there's ever been a greater hiatus than, I believe it was an 11-month hiatus, so that they could do last year, 2019, a new episode beginning the first Monday of January, and then they went through with new episodes until November, and then returned with new episodes the last week of December. So that was the longest, continual streak of new episodes of American Dad. Totally fucked with Hulu's streaming rights. Because, nice job, guys. There's just 2 episodes of season 14 that are not on there because of how the streaming wording is cut off for that show.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I really love the show. But in the very beginning, all right, so if you're not familiar with American Dad, but using Family Guy as a basis, you have Peter Stan, you have Lois Francine, that's the wife, you have Chris, Steve. I don't feel super comfortable saying that, but, kind of lame guy who's in high school.
Yeah, the loser at school that is fighting for his father's affection and often receives it depending on what the story asks for.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have the older daughter. It's not necessarily Meg because they have aged up Haley to 21 so that she can drink and she is attending
But she's
college.
Still the black sheep of the family.
She is the black sheep. Yeah, but she's no Meg Griffin, black sheep of the family. Let's just get that down on paper.
Yeah, but all of the problematic shit that they've done with Meg since the inception of that show, they don't do that with Haley. In fact, more often than not, the story really is, as much as she's the black sheep, Stan specifically loves her very much.
Yes.
That is continuously part of the story between the two of them.
Yeah. It's incredible. It's great. But she is still defined by her headgear, much like Meg's hat, Haley's headband. And then you have Roger, who was an alien from space who is kind of the Stewie in the beginning, but then eventually breaks out to be this whole slew of characters. And then you have Klaus, who is a goldfish with the brain of a German man inside of it. Something that was done so that the Germans wouldn't beat the U.S. in ski jumping. So they switched his brain into a goldfish. And it's never been established why he lives with the Smith family.
Well, it's in the same way that it's never they establish a lot between the relationship between Stan and Roger, but it's not justifiable in a lot of ways.
Well, it's a life debt. It's a life. I mean, they've cleaned it up.
Stan takes on strays. Let's be honest. That is the justification.
That is a big part of that character. However, they have explained that Roger saved Stan's life at Area 51, and now Stan owes him a life debt. To the fact that storyline ran its course, the life debt was repaid, and then it was like, yeah, but we want you to stay with us anyway, Roger. Andy Dick is crazy.
Andy Dick is the worst.
Okay, so that's it. So the character that I want to focus on, the two characters that I really want to focus on are Haley Smith and Klaus. I know his last name, but I don't remember it right now. And I'm all this American Dad knowledge I have been just spewing out of me. And the fact that I can't remember Klaus Heisler's last name, it really bothers me. But yeah, so I want to focus on those two because very early on in the series, as someone who has watched this series start to finish multiple times, 10 years ago, I sat down and I decided I'm going to watch everything that's available. And at that time, they had just passed the 100 episode mark. Right, Now they're currently reaching up on 284, I feel, is the latest episode that aired. Don't quote me on that. 250 was the big one that aired recently, but I know that since that they've added 20 more episodes at least.
Right, yeah.
But in the early days watching the series, Klaus and Haley had this relationship that always kind of interested me. There's an episode where they can communicate telepathically, but they never use it for anything worthwhile. There's the episode where, Klaus wants to feel like a man again, so Haley offers to cut his hair. They have this really strong relationship, and I always felt like in those beginning days of American Dad, there was going to be an episode where Haley wound up in the body of a fish, and we got to explore that relationship a little bit further. Now, granted, that's kind of fan fiction-y, and I wasn't going anywhere gross with it, but just the situation of of the Smiths, it seems like Haley has done the most to try to understand Klaus.
Right.
So,
which makes sense for her character out of all of them.
Yes, especially, she's a hippie-ish kind of person. She cares about rights and all this other stuff. So Klaus becoming a cause for her makes sense. But, that's first season stuff. I think maybe the haircut episode might be season 2, but it's early days things before they set into Haley and Jeff Fisher are going to wind up together. And
there's
that's
a
going
really
to be
good later episode where the two of them are daring each other to do crazier and crazier
that's a
shit.
good episode.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That is pretty fucking rad.
Yes. But there's always been this relationship between Klaus and Haley, and I was always disappointed that it never got that exploration episode.
Yeah.
And then last Monday, we had recorded the show, I had posted it, and I'm always excited for American Dad. It's the only show that I watch brand new. I don't watch any other show. I mean, I watched Last Week Tonight, but usually I'm 5 minutes late to start that because HBO does not care about start time at all. Mm-hmm. It says it starts at 11:05, and I'm like, oh, and I'm sitting there, I gotta go to the bathroom, and then oh god, I gotta back it up. Really? Right when I went to the bathroom, HBO, that's when you started the show? They're watching
give a shit about you.
Hashtag Goat Town is real. But so I sit down to watch The American Dad. And the description says that it's called Rogers for a Dick. And the description is that Dick, one of Stan's coworkers, falls in love with one of Roger's personas, and it has issues on the family. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. So then I start the episode, and I'm watching it, and I'm enjoying it, but that's not the story that's happening. In it, Haley feels like she's not living up to the potential of being this cause person, like rallying behind causes in the wake of all of her friends and what they're doing in the world. So when it turns out that Klaus is not a citizen of the United States, she decides that her cause is going to be getting Klaus citizenship.
Nice.
And, of course, since he is an illegal, since he is an immigrant, the obvious joke is we'll get married. So they get married as a man and a fish. And then, you know, the person interviews him and she's like, it's a little strange that you're a woman and he's a fish. So she puts her brain into a fish body. And this thing that I didn't know how to feel a week ago. That this thing that my mind has like been building up as a potential, but like it has to be gone. Haley is now married to Jeff Fisher. Klaus has been established as the worst character. Klaus jokes are basically to shove it in the face of people who are on Reddit complaining about him. To be like, yeah, we know you don't like him, but he's part of the show. He's not going anywhere. Here's a whole episode about him. So it's like, I never thought that this was going to come to fruition. Siegen, I felt like I got dadded last week. Because they put Haley's brain in a fish. And let me tell you, and the whole reason we're talking about this is because you said Jack Reacher novels, like a good sitcom, the status quo resets at the end. Haley was still in a fish's body last week.
So are you interested to see if they continue that this week?
I doubt they will.
It could go either way with that show. They could
really
continue that storyline, or they could just abandon it.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, just as like a side note, I feel like they did have some desire to actually explore the Klaus Haley thing. But then, you know, when Klaus turned out to be a less than popular character, that's why they introduced Reginald the koala, because he's basically the same character, but a koala.
He's much cooler than Klaus.
Reginald, he drives a limo. You have a mother. You just said that, everybody. And you have a mother. And I'm going to call her.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so they didn't set it, and I don't know what's going to happen. But, you know, spoilers for this episode of American Dad. The official title is One Fish, Two Fish, which, thumbs up. I love a Dr. Seuss reference. Theodore Gassell, love you, man. R.I.P. I could in a house with a mouse. I'm doing it right now. That's the inside joke. You don't get it. I'm sorry. There was
eggs and ham right now. What are you doing?
No, there's a mouse in our house. I was going to add as a disclaimer, at any moment, the mouse trap that I have next to the desk may go off. So apologies. The cat brought a mouse in that they thought was dead.
Sweeps week? We got to promise a possible death in order to get viewers.
No, it does feel like Sweeps week though. We have the question at the end, but first this. No, it's just the cat brought in a mouse, and everybody thought the mouse was dead. I was not in the room. I was doing something on another floor, and then they went to go pick it up, and the mouse sprung to life and ran away. So it could still be in the house, but more likely it died somewhere because of blood loss from being savaged by a cat.
Or ran the fuck out of the house, because mice will do that if the cat is in the house.
Yeah, exactly. And we put the cat right near where the mouse ran towards. But there is a mouse trap. I can see it from the desk, so it could go off. But what was I talking about? Oh, there was the joke where Haley laid eggs and Klaus accidentally impregnated them and they had a bunch of children. But that was at like the middle point, and there was nothing that came of it. But like, that's what fish do. You get a lady fish and a boy fish, you got a lot more fish. It just happens.
Man.
Oh God. But yeah, so that's it. I just felt so good about that American Dad. And it's a time where we need stuff to make us feel good. So Siegen.
Yeah, man, it's just good to dive into like comfort food, things that you know and love right now. Like go do that. Like
which is why I just want to bring this up quick and brief. I don't know everything about it, but do you have feelings about the announcement from DC Comics over the weekend?
I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't know enough about why it happened. Like, do you know what happened? Like, so that everybody knows, DC has cut ties with a pretty long-term distributor, right? Am I wrong about that?
Diamond Distribution Company pretty much has a monopoly on distribution of comic books in the United States of America. And, you know, monopoly, that's a word that we kind of look down our noses at. But it's one of those situations where it's a huge undertaking and no one else really wants to do it.
Right. It's one of those monopolies that we allow to happen because nobody else cares to actually get into that business.
Yeah. Sort of like Amtrak, right? I don't want
Right.
to. I can only go where the tracks already are. I'll drive a bus.
Yeah, exactly.
So they severed ties with them, and the reason being, what it looks like is DC, as is probably well known, was recently acquired by AT&T when they acquired Time Warner.
Right.
So AT&T now has a bunch of people who are in charge, and, you know, we're currently going through a huge quarantine, so you shouldn't be making decisions based on any of the financial numbers that you're getting at this time.
Yeah, right. Yes.
But because the people at AT&T who are now overseeing DC Comics are so unfamiliar with the industry, they see these numbers and think, oh God, we need to change this.
This is on fire. We need to fix this stat.
This
but
fire
they don't
needs to
understand
be
that
put
it's always been on fire. That's just been the comics industry for the last 50 years.
Right. So rather than continue with Diamond, they sever ties with Diamond, and they're going to be doing online distribution from a central location, and the shipping and everything is going to be handled by Midtown Comics in New York. Which is interesting, but what it mostly means is rather than dealing with Diamond Comic Distributions, as all of the small comic book publishers have, and they have long-standing contracts with them, and, you know, they understand that comic books as an industry, it's kind of a some-loss game. So if you don't pay us this week, you'll get us next week. Like this week, all we did was release, I don't know, a Man-Beast comic. I can't think of, like... the character I'm trying to think of.
Right, but next week you'll get a Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman comic. So like,
right. So
yeah.
we'll give you the money that we owe you for this week, next week when everybody's buying our comics. They just focused on the losses, not the fact that how the game is played. So it basically means that your local comic book shop, because they really can't afford to pay the Midtown comic prices in order to have stock for their people, they're no longer going to be carrying DC Comics in the shops. For DC Comics, you're probably going to have to go to a bigger store or directly
if one exists.
Yeah. Well, like I'm talking like Newbury Comics more than likely will keep it going.
Yeah, but I'm thinking of like the little stand. I mean, I'll be fair to them. They had a really nice run shop in Toledo, Ohio called Monarch Comics. Phenomenal little store that as far as I could tell was being run by just two dudes, and I was in there every week, sometimes multiple times a week, just to peruse, see what would come out. They would always do like mega sales on graphic novels January and February of every year. Like they were the go-to in the area for free comic book day. They always hired like local kids to like play like Captain America and Spider-Man, to like take pictures of the kids on that day and stuff. Like great little shop, right? That if you didn't go to them, like you didn't really have any other options. The 2 or 3 other comic book shops in Toledo, they really specialized more in like manga and specialty comics. Like if you were looking for something, they could order it for you type places. They weren't the kind of places where you went in and perused.
Right. But I feel like a place like even like Monarch, which you described, they're probably not going to be carrying DC books right now.
Exactly.
Like,
that's what I mean. So like, what are the people in Toledo going to do? Because they've officially lost the one place that was carrying like new DC.
Yeah. And I don't, because it's a lot of comic places around here, and I travel for like shops, like the One Stop Shop in Clinton, Mass. That's the furthest I've gone for a comic book. And that's about like when we would go get Border Wings when you still lived over here. It's about that distance. So it's not bad, but you know.
No, but it's a trip.
Yeah. But that's a store that specializes in comics and everything that they have. And they just got a larger location, and they're like, we're not going to be carrying DC anymore because we cannot afford to. So DC is hoping to direct the market via online sales through Midtown, and it's very strange. It comes at it comes at a bad time for the industry.
Yep.
Where everything is up in the air because of this 3-month shutdown, 3 months and growing shutdown in this country of pretty much all industry. So I don't know. I honestly don't know what's going to happen to the comic book industry, because as much as Marvel is Marvel and does what it is, no one has the brand recognition like Batman and Superman.
Mm-hmm. I mean, infamously, right? Like, that's the thing, is like your biggest seller for Marvel has, and will probably be for still a while, is Deadpool, and they get a lot of that money in merch more than they do in actual comics themselves. In DC, you're not wrong. I mean, like, between Batman, Superman, and also Harley Quinn, like they've got it's such a weird thing, because the thing is like, this isn't the first time that there's been a major shakeup for some reason or another in the comic book world, and it's going to lead to a lot of things having to change in order for them to work. It's just more proof that the people that are in charge don't care about the consumer at the end. Like, they really, you can't, because right now digital comics are not where they need to be for this plan to work. I'm sorry, they just aren't. Like there's a couple of good comic reading apps out there, and they're not stellar. Like, I talked once on this show about I believe it was Comic X is the one that I have for my Kindle, and it's fantastic for the few graphic novels that I've read that were made for it. But not everything is. So there's this, like, and to be fair, it is the DC stuff specifically that really played really well on it, because it had a really nice flow to it. The way that it moved from panel to panel, the way that it showed you the artwork and then, like, expanded on the artwork to reveal things, actually sometimes made it better than reading, like, a physical comic, because you didn't have that idea that you could glance over at the other page and ruin the surprise for yourself, right? Like, that didn't happen. But then I've read other things in, like, Vertigo, which is or at the time was a DC, like, arm.
I think there's still a DC arm.
Yeah, I didn't think they existed anymore. Don't they do the fucking, like, Sandman universe now, or Black Label or whatever it is instead? Like, right. Like, whatever they relabeled.
Yeah, but it's not like Vertigo's out there on its own. It's gone, yeah. But the characters are there. Sorry.
Yeah. So, but that stuff isn't being formatted in that way. So reading that shit is just like panel to panel to panel, or page to page to page, depending on how I want to read it. Like, those are my two options. So, like, depending on how it's being made, it can be a great experience or it can be a really shit one. And so, like, that can't be the case. If they want people to buy all of their comics digitally, they better be willing to dedicate all of their resources to making their digital comics readable.
Well, I feel like what they're doing right now is they want to draw people to their landing page where you can get the comics, and they're still going to be doing physical media, just we're producing a lot less, because it's probably going to be based off of pre-orders sent beforehand. And unlike if you're on a pull list at a comic book shop, you pre-order, it ships to you, and then you have it. It can't sit in a box waiting for you to come pick it up.
Yeah.
The number of times I spent like $87 picking up 3 months worth of books because I was working on a show and couldn't get down to my local comic shop when I was in college. And
that's one of the things we should acknowledge, is like, the old system for comics was not a great one. Like, you're not wrong. Like, the fact that, like, somebody might not show up for months meant that they were waiting on that money. Like you said before, it was very much a, like, we'll get you next week type of like, industry, right? And that cannot be tenable. Like,
yeah,
you cannot
be
run
a wimpy industry. You can't pay me Tuesday for a hamburger today.
Exactly.
It doesn't work. There's a reason why Wimpy went out of business.
It's just that this feels like the wrong kind of change. And so, like, but that's what I mean, is I don't want to, like, harp on that yet, because, like, we don't know what they're going to do or how they're going to go about this. I know you mentioned that, like, you think a lot of these smaller places are not going to be able to afford these comics for now, but I mean, I have to imagine that within the next few years, they figure out a way to get comic books back into these stores, because, like, it's just like you're cutting off your nose to spite your face in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? Like, it feels really weird, like trying to fix this problem by just, like, removing this entire part of the industry is not the way to go about it. I don't know.
Yeah. And we actually have a case study to look at, because in the late 90s, Marvel did the same thing. except Marvel, rather than going through like a well-known shop like Midtown, they created their own distribution network. And that did not last at all. That shut down very quickly, and mostly because they saw people were just not going to buy Marvel books.
Yeah.
If I can't get it through where I get it through, where I have an existing contract, if I have to completely shift my whole, supply side of this business, it's easier to just cut off that supply. And it's actually one of the reasons why you have things like the Marvel movies that come out at the end of the 90s in order to get people back into stores to buy Marvel books once that grand experiment failed.
Right. Not like Iron Man in the MCU, but like Fantastic Four and like
X-Men
and X-Men
Blade and all of these things to like Blade is its own thing. But the reason why we have an X-Men movie come out in the year 2000, which this is a little foreshadowing because we're going to talk about that movie a bit, Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four, as Siege mentioned, that was to get people going to buy books again. And the books that were coming out in that time, they were real gimmicky books. I tell you what, the Ultimate Universe, which was like tailor-made to try to appeal to new readers, and all of the gimmicks that existed there, the disassembling of the Avengers, Spider-Man, Wolverine, and Daredevil joining the Avengers because of how big they had been in movie form.
Right.
Like, it was nuts. It was a wild west. And I never realized why it was like that until I found out through this action by DC that Marvel had already tried and this had failed for them. So that's the other thing. It may, in fact, not work out, and it's just a weird time in history. The difference being the people in charge now are different, and digital comics do make up a huge portion of that market.
Well, I won't even go so far as to say that, because I honestly don't know how digital comics are really doing. Like, are they doing gangbusters, or are they just doing better than a lot of their physical stuff is doing?
So, revision to my statement, digital comics make up a huge option for this particular situation.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how things go, because like all things that push to digital, here's the thing. Like, here, you want to talk about a case study that did this. Let's look at ebooks. And what happened was a lot of publishers went out of business, and a lot of companies decided we're just going to do digital publishing from here on out. And then like we've seen a huge rise in the last few years of people going back to physical books, mostly because ebook readers turned out to not be that great. They were either too expensive, they weren't doing what they needed to do, they just weren't great options. Also, people just like having that physical shit in their hands. That cannot be denied as a part of all of this. And like a huge part of comic book collecting is the collecting. So, like, to not be able to do that, they're really, really going to be looking at an uphill battle, shall we say.
Yeah. I don't know. But it's something that, like, really caught my eye this weekend. It's like, this is the worst possible time for you to be doing this.
Yeah. Well, considering everything else going on with DC right now and HBO Max and them not knowing what to do with the fucking DC Universe app because of all that, and what will become of the movies now that we are allowing them to go back and remake movies all of a sudden, like it's going to be fucking crazy.
Yeah, DC is going to be one to watch, and not for the reason that you sometimes watch things.
Yeah.
More to see how this trash fire goes on. Will it be contained or will it spread? We'll be here checking it out to let you know. Why isn't Lunatics Unleashed on HBO Max? There's my question. It's your fault that I have to ask that question.
You need to save some of the good stuff, man. Like, you can't release everything all at once.
Yeah. It might actually have to do with the fact that it's very violent in the wake of Elmer Fudd and Yosemite Sam no longer being armed in any of the new Looney Tunes stuff.
Still good, though.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, a scythe is far deadlier than a friggin' gun for a rabbit. Right? You bring a scythe. I don't think Bugs Bunny knows how to use a scythe. He knows how to use a shotgun. I've watched it. He's also kind of good at basketball. Kinda. If Michael Jordan wasn't there, then the Monstars would have won. changed my mind.
Let's be fair. If Bill Murray wasn't there, the Monstars would have won.
Wayne Knight. I could play this game all
better
day.
basketball players than Bugs Bunny. That's all we're saying.
Yeah, if Lola Bunny hadn't been there. Jeez. We're going to watch Space Jam one day, Siegen, I promise you. This is my promise to you.
I've seen it.
I know how much you love it. It's your favorite movie.
I tried to say something that would upset the masses, and then I couldn't even bring myself to say it.
Yeah, it's not like, I can't even think of something to upset the masses right now. So, do you have anything else to talk about, to add to this discourse, or?
No, I half dropped that I've been reading some Stephen King too earlier, and so I picked up his latest book. It's got a couple of really good twists in it, and I mean like meta twists, not like twists in the story itself. Not least of which, I mean, this is one that I'll just give away. Like, it's not just one story, which I will be fair. I will be honest. I didn't look deep in it. I just saw that a new Stephen King book dropped, and I was like, oh great, and I'll grab it. And the back of the back of the sleeve is like, here's the background story on this book, and I was like, great, sounds awesome. Got it home, and then I started reading the first chapter, and I was like, this doesn't sound like the story on the back of the book at all. And sure enough, it's because it's a collection of short stories again. So just be warned about that. I mean, like, that not a real warning. Some of his best work comes out of that sort of stuff, but that is what it is. But there's also some other shit in it that I was just like, oh, this is interesting. Like, I was like very surprised by some of the stuff in his new book. But yeah, I've been reading some Stephen King too.
Very cool. I was gonna ask you, is it like, do you mean anthology wise, or there are multiple narratives going on? So thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
All right. So I believe it's time in the episode where we have to answer the question of what Walk the Dinosaur means.
Yeah, and everybody is gonna really hate this because like all television shows that promise to reveal the truth at the end, this is gonna be underwhelming because it's gonna come from a source that is untrustworthy in all of this.
Can I give you what I think it is? Because you gave a little.
You give me what you think. You give me what you think it is first, and then I'll get into what I think it might be.
You gave a little hint while we were talking about #GoatTown, and it made me think, oh, that's what it is. Is it when you got an erection? So you gotta like walk in that weird way because you have an erection? Is that walking the dinosaur? Again,
you're in the vicinity, but you're just not playing with it yet. So everybody take this with a grain of salt. It is coming from Urban Dictionary, which means that this is this is a definition that is put on it obviously later after it becomes kind of like memey and great to talk about this thing, but it is the only definition, the only solid definition I could find out there. And when I say solid definition, I don't mean it makes sense. I mean it's the only thing that says here is the word, here is what defines it. Walk the dinosaur. To go out in public without any boxers or briefs on underneath your clothes so your junk bounces around for everyone to see.
See, I disagree with that. And not just because I'm a contrarian, but because in the song, if anyone ever bothered to listen to the end, the final chorus is not walk the dinosaur, it's kill the dinosaur.
Yes. But considering how much the rest of that song is, shall we say, alliterative, like it takes some liberties with the English language in a lot of ways. I would argue that kill the dinosaur could simply just mean something in that same, for lack of a better word at the moment, vein.
So I think you're walking the dinosaur because your erect member represents a tail. So you're like a dinosaur. You're walking the dinosaur, and then to kill the dinosaur,
as it were,
as it does, and then to kill the dinosaur is to get that release.
Yes.
I had never really considered it before today, but then I don't mind that like it bounces around in a jovial fashion, but like when I listened to that song, and I listened to it a couple of times, just like I asked you to do, I got this idea that like, oh, we're watching a movie together and you're asleep and I'm sitting over here walking the dinosaur.
Yeah. I think the closest thing that I can think to really kind of bring this home, the image that I can think to bring this home, is think about like every time you saw one of those like claymation dinosaurs from like the Harryhausen films walking, and the way that every time they would take a step forward, and this is true of every like dinosaur puppet ever, is it just kind of it sways as it moves.
Yeah. You walk the dinosaur. Open the door. Get on the floor. Everybody walk the dinosaur.
Yeah.
Because we're all erect at some point in our life. I don't know. Jesus, this took a turn. But because you had read it... damn you, Sejan. Damn you. Straight to hell. Okay, so one other thing. Proving just how behind the curve we are, the thing we were so excited about coming up last Thursday immediately canceled as we stopped recording the episode.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they even showed a big commercial during that American Dad of, like, make sure you're there for the big reveal. And for good reason. I think that Sony played that correctly to say, like, really not the time for this in light of what's going on.
The cynic can say, like, hey, they probably didn't have much to announce anyway, but, like, the other side of that is that no matter what they had to say, they made the right move.
Yeah. But good news, all of the jubilation and excitement and feelings from last episode, you can copy and paste them onto us right now because it has been announced that it will be happening this Thursday, June 11th.
Yes.
So hopefully next episode we'll have some PlayStation stuff to talk about. And more hopefully, Microsoft or Nintendo will try to snipe the spotlight. And we'll also have something exciting from one of those. But again, we don't know. We're just two guys doing our show in our home studios. Who knows? So any last words, Siege? Anything final?
Why doesn't Tom Hanks have an Oscar yet? Nothing.
Does Tom Hanks really not have an Oscar?
No, not to my knowledge. God. I think he's only ever credited as Academy Award nominee Tom Hanks. I don't think he's ever credited as anything more than that.
Well, I mean, he has Oscars for not acting, right?
Right.
Like,
I'm sure
I believe, on a creative end,
like, as a producer, because he's produced so much. No, that was all though.
Oh, that's like Paul Newman. I recently watched The Hustler and The Color of Money, and The Hustler, like, he was nominated, and it made his Joanna Woodward very sad when he didn't win that for The Hustler. But then he would win as Fast Eddie Felson again in The Color of Money. So maybe Tom Hanks just needs to replay a character that he played 20 years ago. Forrest Gump too.
And before everybody shits all over me, I know he won for Forrest Gump, but I know he won for Philadelphia. I'm just sitting here just thinking about it was just a thought that came to my head.
He has an Oscar.
Yes, I think multiple.
I haven't seen any of those movies you mentioned. I've never seen Forrest Gump. And Philadelphia, I actually have it on my post-quarantine to-do list, is to watch Philadelphia. I actually have it as Philadelphia, the movie, in parentheses, and then below it, Philadelphia, the city, in parentheses. There's two different things I want to do. All right, that's enough. We've been jabba-jawing long enough. Goat Town is trying to get in touch with us, so we have to go. And we appreciate all of you. If you'd like to give me any more information on Goat Town, I am here. Please find me on Twitter at Devin D. Decker. I want to help you. I want to find you. I want to bring you back into the light.
Yeah, and if you want to fact check anything else I said this episode, you can get me at Siege versus the World.
All right. And before we pass it over to Will, remember, please stay safe, stay strong, be well, be excellent to each other, and Will, take us home, bud.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devin Decker and Stephen Selwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.